Chapter 13. As if everyone's day couldn't get any worse, the Ed's tugboat crashed into a tree. Not only that, it crashed in the worst place ever. They were stuck in a swamp with murky waters, decomposing trees, and a woods area where many dangerous animals could be hiding. Where's your fauna now, Mr. Duckboat? Eddy said once again, blaming everything on Ed. Ed wanted to backlash so badly. He wanted to call Eddy out on how he fought him over the steering lever. He snapped that he didn't know a shortcut. What shortcut? He had no idea where they were going. The collision was unavoidable, Eddy. It was the unpredictable current that proved unfavorable. This place was the worst, although Ed didn't seem to mind. Eddy slapped a mosquito off his head. Unbelievable. All I know is we're stuck in a swamp in the middle of nowhere. Big Brother ain't gonna be impressed. Ed slumped, his hands suddenly turning into fists. Is that what you're thinking? That I'm here to impress your brother? That I would forsake my home and family for something so trivial as a ghost? Ed shouted. They both heard a splash. Was he really swimming in this filthy water? Ed noticed how Eddy wanted to join Ed. And that was another reason why they crashed. Ed and Eddy were fooling around like they always did. Perhaps we should talk about you and Ed's immature behavior, Ed continued on with his rant. I'm sure he'd like to hear about that. Did he actually think his brother would care about his behavior? His brother had the behavior of a psychotic maniac. Eddy almost wished his friends knew, so they wouldn't be out here. Ed heard the bickering in the water. Crocodile attack! He yelled, attacking Eddy and fighting with him as if in the mucky water. The two boys played around as one of them tried to capture the other and ran out of sight into the dark forest. Ed sighed, aghast of how immature his friends were acting. Wait! Where are you going? Ed quickly leapt off from a lily pad, to a log, and to a rock. He wasn't going to touch that disgusting water. Who knew what kind of creatures permitted in it? A malodorous marsh is not a good place to play, gentlemen! He finally reached solid ground, but a gigantic forest lay all around him. A deep forest with gigantic trees, roots hanging from the branches, the small things rotting. He felt as if all kinds of creatures were staring at him. Do you hear me? He finally called out again. Over here, Sockhead! Eddy called out. Ed backed up, only to paralyze in fear. Ed and Eddy were disappearing beneath the earth. Eddy gripped the ground, trying to pull himself out, but to no avail. He looked at Ed with a look of fear in his eyes. Make no sudden movements. Ed was finally able to speak. You're sinking in quicksand! Quicksand! Eddy screamed. He turned and grabbed Ed, who finally looked as if he understood the trouble they were in. Ed! We're done for! We are so immature! Stupid immature! Eddy gripped his friend, but unaware that he was causing Ed to sink faster. Oh man, we're really sinking now! To all the girls I loved before! Ed yelled out before he completely disappeared under the mud. Oh, Ed! Eddy dug his hand into the mud and retrieved his friend by the eyebrow. Hang on, man! Double D! Ed wasted no time as he tried to make a rope out of a tall patch of weeds. His friends were screaming for help. He went to glance at him, but he couldn't do that. He needed to focus on what he was trying to do. Their screams for help were the most important thing. Stay calm, don't panic, he said to himself as bucket loads of sweat dripped out from his head. The knots were secured. I've got it! Quickly! Take hold of it! The rope splashed in the mud. Ed and Eddy weren't there. The only noise there was in the silent woods was the sound of bubbles popping on the surface of the mud. Ed didn't move, trying to comprehend the events that just happened. He was too late. No! He was all alone. No! His friends were dead. No! Ed flew his arms into the mud, hysterically digging through it to see if they were still close enough to be at the surface for him to grab. Where are you? He screamed as he threw mud everywhere, even all over himself, trying to see if he could drain the whole pit. Eddy! Ed! Oh, don't you give up on me! Answer me! Ed slapped his hands in the mud in defeat. He had to stop before he threw himself in. Tears drenched his face. This wasn't real. This all had to be a dream, but no. The dream would usually end with the laughter. Ed stared, horrified at what he let happen. He brought on their pain. He took too long to help them. No. To get to them. No. To tell them not to wander off. Oh, why didn't you listen to me? Ed screamed, pounding at the mud. He slumped his face into it and sobbed, finally letting the awful truth sink into his brain. This is all my fault! I should have never let you leave the cul-de-sac! He sobbed and sobbed. Although he was all alone, he heard the laughter. He was a fool. Disgrace. Useless. He was the one who careened them out of the cul-de-sac when he grabbed the merry-go-round. He only saw something to laugh at. A tissue caught Ed's eye. Thank you, Ed. Goodness, Ed, that's filthy! His teal eyes bulged. Ed and Eddy stood in front of him. They weren't in trouble. They weren't dead. They were just smiling. Gotcha! They burst into laughter, falling to their backs. They were laughing at him. Eddy stared into his blubbering friend's face. You are such a sap! This mud's only an ankle deep. Can't sink in it. Ed stood up, only to stand right in the mud that was a few seconds ago was made to look like quicksand. It was only an ankle deep. The world stopped as Ed gathered how all of this was just a ruthless prank by the two people he called by their name, his best friends. Got that right, Eddy, Ed chimed, because things are Mother Nature's own cereal box. Eddy just stared at Ed with a blank face. He never understood his friend's random sayings. He looked up to see the rope that was tied around Eddy lay vacant in the mud. Hey, Sockhead! Where are you going? You got somewhere to be or what? Ed grew concerned. Eddy, you said Double D would laugh. He's just being a baby. Ed wouldn't act this way. He knew something was wrong when he saw the filthy boy wallowing in the mud. As they ran after him, he had an uneasy feeling.